talking to one part of the government. You're talking to one level of the chain of command. You are not talking necessarily to the whole chain. So let's over communicate in these situations and provide that SA. So that'll help the system. But the important thing is having unity of message throughout all those communications and throughout the industry.
Have you talked to the FEMA continuity folks about alignment with their annual continuity exercise, Eagle Horizon?
Yeah, we've participated at an ISAC level in Eagle Horizon and a number of the other exercises along the way. We actually had Brock Long, former FEMA administrator, facilitate the tabletop in, I think it was GridX 6. And we talked a lot about some of the resilient communications capabilities, the cows and the mobile units. And, you know, having those, instead of parked at the CEO's house, what if you parked one of those near a control center and helped the different control centers to talk about? I don't know where that conversation has progressed. I think, you know, as the federal government has pushed response more down to the local level, and engaging those capabilities, I'm not sure that is the right avenue to go at the moment, but working with the state and local emergency management communities to make sure those vital control centers can talk to each other, or at least the government folks can talk to the control center, because we know a lot of the ISOs, RTOs, the balancing authorities are building some really resilient dark fiber and other communication pathways to do their own communication, but making sure that the government is able to plug into that is essential.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Bob.
Your point on the recommendations is well taken, and your general point on, hey, you've got head nods that all these are good ideas from whomever you briefed over the years all the time. What's your perspective on avenues to make these recommendations more enduring in process? Is it legislation? Is it doctrine? Is it just continuing to bang your head and every year at the start make people like you know, we've all been doing this long enough. How do you reflect on the fact that the process breaks at a certain level?
So like many of the challenges we face across the economy, it's systemic, and I think, you know, we are living in a world that's not up to speed with the laws that we operate under are not up to speed with the world we live in. And unfortunately, there does need to be some legislative changes around things like liability protections, around access to information, around funding of national security related cyber and physical activities. But this is something, to make it enduring, it has to be legislative, and then you can bring in the doctrine. And, you know, we'll keep having the same recommendations from GridX and other exercises. We have briefed several congressional committees on this, and states as well. But I fear that the sky has to turn black before we see some action. But we will keep making people aware. That was a really positive note. So on recommendation 5, this is more akin to the EISAC's wheelhouse, but the importance of reauthorizing CISA 2015 or something like that protects and incentivizes information sharing, as well as working with some of these operational collaboration centers, like the ETAC Energy Threat Analysis Center in Denver, the CRIS program that the ISAC runs on behalf of industry, the Lighthouse program in Canada. These types of very unique public-private information sharing groups are really essential to detect some of this malicious cyber activity, but even cyber criminal activity like ransomware, et cetera, and trying to enroll more and more critical infrastructure in that. And then building some, you know, really top-tier analytics on that's really important. And then I'm 6. There is some hope with drones and counter UAS. I know the FAA has a NOPR out right now that I encourage you all to provide your comments on. Whether or not that provides the relief and the reassurance that I think we frankly need in this age of drone warfare and the capabilities that a $500 drone can bring against a multi-million-dollar substation. You know, little drones are not aircraft, and I'm glad the FAA is finally moving. But it's, again, to the point, the question that Bob asked, it's moving too slowly, and there needs to be kind of a rethinking in how that's treated, because as we saw in the Middle East, as we're seeing in Ukraine, drones are the unfortunate near-term future of warfare. I mentioned liability protection, particularly for the investor-owned utilities. There's a lot of financial risk in taking on resilience measures, but also sharing information. And if you are being attacked at a nation-state level, isn't that something that requires a little more beyond the usual protections? And that obviously has to be a legislative fix. And then finally, what you all have been talking about here in the resilient communications and how we develop those technologies so that different groups can talk. So questions or observations on this one, knowing that we're about to come up on time, Chris?
Hi, Matt. I'm curious about the overall aspect of that, you know, we are in a geopolitical uncertain environment, and also governmental inaction is a big problem. What are the efforts that your organization has with dealing directly with the governance portions of organizations? Are you working directly with boards of directors of corporations to be able to make them aware of these risks and having them implement in a cooperative fashion to kind of basically supplement or go around government?
Yeah, 100%. I was in Houston yesterday briefing the board of a large trade association. We have briefed utility boards, state commissions, provincial commissions. I actually think boards take this incredibly seriously, but they're balancing it against a much broader, risk management profile, trying to manage the data center growth, large loads, et cetera. But we are working on that. There are other organizations, like the NERC regions, that I think can play a strong role in working with state and provincial governments, while NERC works with DOE and the federal government. Stephen.
Yeah, Matt, great presentation. I think there's a lot of utility members here. What would be your number one takeaway if you can go back and have us fix anything based on what we learned from GridX? What would that be from the EISAC?
Always going to be resilient communications. I believe in the resilience of the electricity sector. I am concerned about the resilience of the telecommunications sector, frankly. And they're doing a lot of work to enhance that, but they're also a huge target, and they have global infrastructure. So it's not through lack of trying, but it is, if you saw it in the simulation before, if you can't talk, the amount of restoration that you can do is limited. And this is where I think the energy sector and the electricity industry has been really forward-leaning on developing organic resilient communications capabilities. And I could see on a really, really bad day, local government may have to rely on their local utility for some amount of communication. And that's great, but depending on how big the regional impacts are, can the different utilities and areas work together on that? So it is, that's the one thing that and the water sector, but let's focus on the telecommunications first. All right.
Thanks. Any last questions for Matt? I think you have to go, right, Matt?
No, I've got about an hour, but
good.
I don't want to stand in the way of lunch.
Good. Okay. Well, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, how about we just do this by exception? So these were the distributed play recommendations. Any feedback or observations from the TVA or the Exelon Dominion PJM distributed play that you want to share with me or the group? These were some of the recommendations that were submitted from the 378 utilities that participated. Again, very similar to the tabletop recommendations, but I think that we've learned a lot over the years in terms of how we build the tools that we give to you all for free to play in GridX. And just really pleased that we've been able to bring in the gas sector, the water sector, the telecoms, state and local government, and increasingly, this is important, the vendor community. Most of our stuff is operated by other people. And yes, you may have contracts, but as Ben Bolton knows from gasoline shortages, are you a firm customer or not? So these are all things that you need to think about, and it's truly a broad-ranging resilience effort. Yes, sir.
Sir, would it be possible in your future exercises to take into account resource depletion, like, hey, fuel supplies are going down, pressure in natural gas lines are going down, et cetera, to be able to make decisions on what do you prioritize at that point?
Yeah, prioritization has always been a huge focus for the GridX tabletop in particular, but I think imposing those constraints on distributed play with local leadership is really important, because nobody wants to say, all right, are we going to prioritize that compressor station or the hospital? But these are the frank, difficult decisions that that leaders have to make. I think that's kind of where the liability protections for some of the privately held assets would help. But it also is where the coordination and making sure everybody knows where they are in the utilities restoration stack.
Can you tell us exactly what are you doing, any kind of vulnerability testing that you're actually doing, or is this just table talk, people's professional opinion, or are you actually testing and finding out exactly what's needed out there and where we really stand?
What type of vulnerability are you talking about?
I'm talking about actually vulnerability testing of all of our infrastructure, how things are going to respond, actually physically testing them.
So that is actually work that's being done by DOE from the energy sector perspective through the national labs. That is not in our remit at the ISAC or NERC. We also use we use the data provided by the balancing authorities and the ISO RTOs about kind of our long-term reliability assessment forecasts. But we are not actively going out and doing vulnerability assessments of everybody's infrastructure. It's too big of a job, and that's an inherent, in my opinion, an inherently federal or state responsibility. We can certainly help where needed with utilities, and whether it's monitoring for cyber vulnerabilities or doing operational technology assessments, where we go in and just make sure you've changed those default passwords on that 30-year-old Windows XP box that is still operating, or that all the ports are closed, and oh yeah, do you know you have a Bluetooth signal coming from your transformer? These are all things that we can help teach, but it is a big job, and I know a lot of the utilities, when they have the resources, can do this, but for the broader national critical infrastructure, that is a federal mission. And just so you're aware, next GridX coming up next year in November for GridX 9. And these are some of the goals that we've put out there for that, continuing to build the library of injects that operators can use both from a cyber and physical perspective, and increasingly a resilience perspective. And now is the planning is already underway. So getting together with either your utility planner or your state or local emergency management planner and get this right for the next one, because if you think about it, look at that date, November 16th, 2027, that's what, 2 months after the tides are super high in the South China Sea. This is actually one of the reasons we're doing the GridX executive tabletop in February of 2027, so that we can, at least from a senior leadership level, think about how might we be prepared should that happen in 2027. But it is, time's a-wasting. So start planning now. And again, it's a great opportunity for all the guardians of the grid, as we call them, to get together and plan for the worst day. Go ahead.
So in the National Guard, we used to always do our resilient communications test as part of our tabletop. So we'd do a tabletop, but we'd also actually physically test some communication systems. And I know we've tried to integrate some of that previously with different GridX stuff. Is there any plan to like maybe do some actual communications testing and stuff kind of in conjunction or leading up to that?
Yeah, we did that in GridX 5 with actually some of the utilities here in the room. Because of COVID and some other things that kind of fell by the wayside for 6, 7, I know some of the individual utilities did that for GridX 8. And it's a practice we want to encourage for GridX 9, and it'll enable us to test the ESCC, resilient communications directory and playbook, as well as some of the other capabilities. But you're right, that's a really good practice to add to a tabletop. Sunny, it's good to see you.
Yeah, good to be here. I just wanted to also, because the ESF2 has the COM-ISAC, and the COM-ISAC does spring training, and spring training does telecom analysis, parent-child homing analysis. Should this great example was the Nashville bombing, when we lost the end office and it took out 911 for multiple states. The parent-child homing analysis that we had on the bandwidth for that site was able to interconnect us immediately graphic-wise on what buildings were likely down, what buildings took some level of degradation and would need to be offset by which other ones through what connection points. So we started looking at needing more parent-child homing analysis through each one of those COM exercises. So arguably going forward, is there room for the COM-ISAC and the EISAC to partner up on these kinds of initiatives so that people can see some of the moves the COM-ISAC's made and coming together, breaking down those barriers to be able to showcase a geospatial product of, you know, imminent failure should one of these parents go down, all of these children fall with them.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Sunny, because having that kind of parent-child analysis of what your dependencies are, especially for the most critical assets, is vital for a safe and swift restoration. So from an ISAC to COM-ISAC perspective, their ISAC is much, much smaller than ours is, and even the new C2 ISAC that's being stood up. I think there's an opportunity with that group, but also the leadership of the big 8 telecom companies to work with either the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council or NERC to try to put that together, because I will tell you, people have tried for over a decade now to put this national mapping. For those that were around in 2016, there was the North American Electric Resiliency Model, the NARM. I know some national labs are still working on some of that work. There was the Energy Arc that did work like that. So it's not for a lack of trying, but there needs to be dedicated momentum to push this type of analysis, and maybe groups like the Alliance for Critical Infrastructure that was just stood up might be an avenue for that. But really, it really needs the top-down force to do it. But it's a great idea, and it needs to be done. And maybe this is something that can start organically, locally, and have it feed up through because I know local telephone companies and electricity utilities always get along great, especially when people cut through their wires on a pole. But I think that's a good opportunity for collaboration.
Thank you very much, Matt. Matt Duncan. If you can stick around, that would be great. What's that? You can stick around. I knew you had to.
Yeah, no, I've got about an hour.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. I want to step forward and we'll go back to the main deck, but really this is a time for discussion. I wanted to welcome forward Chris Pylong from PJM and Mariana Holden, Commissioner Emeritus from the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. Did I get all that right? If you'd like to sit, if you'd like to stand, whatever is preferable. But essentially, I wanted to get a follow-up to we've seen some of these recommendations of what happens in an emergency, and what we're talking about is cross-sector coordination and 2 important sectors that have to work together and are kind of set up in most people's minds to be adversarial, or at least kind of keeping each other in check, are the private sector and the regulators. So I wanted to just get first some perspective kind of on the findings you've just heard, I know you both have a lot of experience with past grid X's, et cetera, so lead into that, and then we'll kind of broaden the discussion out on how cooperation can be enhanced. I'll start ladies first. I'll start with Mariana. So
That would be me?
Please.
Well, I came to the Board of Public Utilities, not necessarily through a political way, although I was friends with the governor, but I had been in 2011. I had experienced in Madison, New Jersey, where I was the mayor. We have our own electric utility, water utility, and wastewater facility. 2011, we had a blizzard, an earthquake, Hurricane Irene, and a snowmageddon in October with the leaves still on the trees. The only thing we didn't have were locusts, but that was the next year. So I actually was one of those kind of early adopters, even if it was 2011, for using Facebook. And I was just so frustrated not being able to get a hold of the electric distribution company that had its feeder line coming into our substation. I put it up on Facebook and I said, no one's getting back to me. I just want anybody that's on Facebook to share in town what we're trying to do, blah, blah, blah. What it actually did as communication was it forced the electric distribution company to call me and then lie to me, of course. So fast forward, after the storms, I have a meeting with the electric distribution company, and they've come with beautiful PowerPoint slides and how, oh no, it was just a miscommunication. And I'm telling them, you lied to me. You lied to all these communities. Everybody in the state is complaining about you. Then Governor Christie puts me on the Board of Public Utilities. I'm like, hello, remember me? And we were able to actually start getting some action, but there had never been anyone on the board that had any utility experience until I got there, after 100 years. And it really begs the question, and Chris and I were talking about this earlier, you have to think about, I'm kind of a unicorn at the board. I was there for 12 years. I'm still not the longest serving, but I was there for 12 years. The average lifespan of a commissioner across the country is 3 to 5 years. So if you come into it because you're a political hack and you do learn something, by the time you actually can start to grasp what's going on in these systems, how to react in these situations, you're gone. So I just wanted to kind of lay out the framework of what you have to deal with and how you have to keep beating this home and beating this home. You're like, oh no, we're going to have another conversation about EMP again. A lot of people don't know what it is. Thank goodness for the movie coming out this fall, 1 second after, and I know we're going to hear about that tomorrow. I just want to give you a little spoiler alert. Read 1 year after. Same author, same background. It's 1 year after this catastrophe. And you go, oh, here's the woulda, coulda, shoulda we should have done in that scenario leading into it. So preparation, beating home a message, trying to explain in simple terms to people or see it visually. And one of the discussions we have, I'm part of a little group called the Foundation for Infrastructure Resilience. One of the things we talk about is we want to promote this film, but is anybody going to believe that this is real? So we have an obligation to explain, hey, this could happen. You could take a drone with a dirty bomb and set it off. And what could it do? Oh, is that possible? Yeah, and I think we're seeing that right now in the Middle East.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just add a couple of comments sort of building on Marianne was saying there, and from the discussion earlier with sort of and I didn't think of it as adversarial there, Chris. I thought we were going to box for a minute when you introduced this, but the coordination we have from the...
I didn't mean you two, but I go ahead.
But from a PJM perspective, we had been talking about this for a number of years. I'll go back maybe 10 years ago. We had started saying we should probably have some kind of a playbook where we know how to interface with government agencies and what can they do, how can they help with us. And then we've over the years went from let's have a playbook to, we actually, as Mike Bryson mentioned earlier today, he's on the phone with DOE at least once a month, and it's actually a lot more frequent than that. And one of the things we've discovered is it isn't just the communication, it isn't just the outreach and the continuing outreach as the turnover occurs, but it's understanding what is it you're trying to communicate and how can that government agency help you. So it's not just, hey, government agency, we have a storm coming through. We have a storm coming through, we have infrastructure that might be at risk, we have generators we may want to run, but they're environmentally limited. Can you help us? And finding ways to do that. And we actually do that, as the system is getting sort of tighter and tighter, and we're experiencing more and more natural disaster type events and weather events. We're using that communication, that outreach actually more and more frequently. And thankfully, in many cases, it's just to be prepared. It's to have the order ready to go and ready to be signed, that if we need to run that generator or implement some type of operating procedure, that we have the authority to do so. There's not going to be any lawsuits that come along after the fact. Of course, in the moment, everybody's willing to help. It's the after the fact you'll have to be worried about. So having the communication in advance, the how can each of us help each other has been really critical, and I think builds on some of the recommendations we've had before. And as Mariana said, with the turnover, it's got to be continual. You keep the contacts fresh, you keep the people understanding who we are on the electric side, what their roles are, and how they can help us.
There was a point when PJM and Board of Public Utilities were quite adversarial. But I'd say in the last, maybe 5, 6 years, it really has, the communication opened. We were doing things that had never been done in this country. It was something called the state agreement approach for interconnection. Of course, that's all gone by the wayside since there's no more offshore wind coming to New Jersey. But one of the other things is, for instance, with EMP, you could come up with this is going to solve the problem, this is exactly, and some of the solutions they're fairly simple. And when you consider the value of lost load, doing these things makes a lot of sense. However, utilities will do whatever you want them to do, just they want recovery. And how am I going to pay for it? And in this day and age where the buzzword is affordability, it's affordable at any cost after you've had a major storm. I don't care what it's going to cost. I just want my electric back on. I don't care. I just want to be able to flush the toilet. Why do I have to fill the tub with water to flush the toilet? I mean, those kind of basic survival skills that no one has. God forbid we have a time where we're foraging for food, or you've got to have some kind of survival. Some of the younger generation, if there's no DoorDash, they don't eat. They're going to starve. So, again, it's something that you have to keep in mind. There's a political force, and they think they can order something to be done, and it's like, well, the laws of physics haven't changed. This actually can't be done. And so sometimes you cut your nose to spite your face, because you want to cut costs, but you're actually going to raise costs ultimately by not being practical and being part of the discussion.
You've hit on a couple things that I wanted to follow up on. So one thing, Mariana, you started with and said that you came to the Board of Public Utilities with some industry experience, and that is rare. I mean, basically, to have public-private partnerships that work, both sides have to be able to talk to each other in a language that they understand. Chris, you talked about, well, maybe we don't have to, or the posture we might want to take with the regulators is reaching out and saying, here's what we need, here's what we can provide, and here's what we need you to do for us. So I wanted to just, whether it's a example of restoration or recovery or not, maybe just cite an example where you've had a good industry regulator experience, where that communication worked, that you would hold up as an example, and maybe within that, how we can find, because everyone sort of wants the same end goal, but I think we talk past each other a lot and we get in each other's way when we don't need to. So I'll start with you, Chris, and come back to Mariana.
Yeah, thankfully, we haven't had the need for a restoration event. But I think the key is and would we have? I don't know, but we've had some good collaboration to make sure that we don't get there. And that's been key. We've recently had, even just as recently as a few weeks ago, needing to run a generator that was about to exceed its environmental limitations. And if we couldn't have run that unit, the world wouldn't have fallen apart necessarily right away, but had one more thing gone wrong, we could have had load at risk. So not a blackout event, not black sky, but we could have load customers at risk. And if something more than one bad thing happens, it could quickly escalate. So we were able to work with DOE, get a specific order issued for us. It's public, it's called a 202C order, which essentially says if PJM says this is an emergency, we need that unit to run, it can run. We said there's an emergency, we're trying to avoid really a worse emergency, and we're able to run that generator, and we will most likely utilize that order again before we reach the end of this year. But because we're able to do that, we're able to keep the system in a secure state and not have that additional risk on the grid that could escalate. And we're prepared to issue that, and we've issued that same order, requested that same order when we've had more, that was actually for a more localized concern, but we've used that same process for wider area concerns of do we have enough capacity for the grid on extreme emergency days. Again, environmental limitations have typically come into play so far. I was hoping to go through a meeting and not have to talk about data centers at all, because that seems to be the only thing that I end up talking about in many cases. But I will say that was actually one where we recently, over this past winter, didn't even ask for the order. We actually had the government agency recognizing, we see that across a good portion of the Eastern interconnection, that there is extreme cold weather coming, there could be capacity concerns, and we recognize that there are many large load data center customers that have a significant amount of backup generation. So the DOE said we're issuing a blanket order. You can use this backup generation, which otherwise would be environmentally limited. So it's another good example of the government partnerships with everyone really at that point to ensure the reliability of the grid and understanding who has different roles, who has authorities, and being able to coordinate on that.
And go ahead, Mariana, just to remind everyone, if you have a comment, question, follow-up, this is discussion mode, but go ahead, please.
You're bringing up bad memories of Hurricane, which was Superstorm Sandy, where it was exactly that. We had to go and get an emergency relief so that generators could run beyond their limitations. And if you think about it, if you really put some thought to it, why can't that be done all the time? Why is there this limitation when you could take some of the load off the grid while you're trying to develop new energy sources? But I digress. It is a constant dialogue to try and get people to prepare ahead of time. That was the greatest thing that got our town through, at least in Hurricane Irene, is that we recognized what was coming, and everybody that was going to be involved in the operation at some point, or could be involved, from setting up shelters to food supplies to who has generators, where the lift stations are, where we've had problems in the past, even going back to the 60s for some of the hurricanes and flooding. Where were the problems in town? Let's go and make sure those places are kept clean so that the catch basins or whatever could take the water away. I mean, we had literally manhole covers popping up off because of all the water rushing through the system. And it was sitting around. I even had to throw the Red Cross out of the meeting because they said, well, we're not going to set up shelters. Like, you're the one that was designated regionally to do this. I said, get out. We'll do it ourselves. We did it with a couple of churches. It was knowing who to call in and who to talk to. As far as the working with the electric distribution company or who was bringing the power into our substations, how many times I have to call Akron, I'm saying, you're killing me. And so that's the unnamed utility that but you're killing me. Just give us the power. We can put it up. Our guys are rated the same as yours. And when I got to the board, that was the other thing. We are 9 municipalities in the state that have their own distribution company and utility employees. They're all rated the same. They all belong to the same union. Why do you have to call people and wait for people to come from Alabama to New Jersey when you've got workforce that will help within the state? And it was a constant, well, I suppose you'll want to be paid for that. I'm like, well, no, I'm sure the people from Georgia and Alabama are coming out of the goodness of their hearts and sleeping in their trucks. But yes, we would like to be compensated, but don't you want to serve your customers more quickly? So you've got to have somebody who's got a little guts to speak up, but it's a learned thing, and I think like Chris is saying, you just got to keep at it and keep reminding people and go through it, but there's not enough training and exercise. The one thing that New Jersey set up before any other states, and actually Obama copied us, was the communication center. It was set up for cyber, so anybody, any of the utilities, if they're having problems and people are trying to penetrate their system, which they do every day, that is immediately reported. Well, that same center should be utilized for all kinds of activities, because it's not only cyber, but it's kinetic problems they're having. And you have cities that have things like ShotSpotter that are set up. Oh, I'm sorry, it's racist. We can't have ShotSpotter in our city anymore. Are you kidding me? What is the benefit of some of these things? It's got to get the politics out of the physics of dealing with these utility situations.
Any questions? Yeah, go ahead. Tom.
Yeah, just a question to each of you is, if you were king for a day or queen for a day, and you could get one thing that we don't have today in this coordination, what would it be?
Maybe I'll go ahead and start. I kind of keep referencing this emergency DOE 202C order. I think that's probably one of the most powerful tools, at least from an emergency response perspective, or trying to avoid the emergency that we've been able to utilize from the government. Thankfully, we've gotten that down to we can get an order as long as we have all the communications there. And we've done some of this, believe me, Christmas Day, for example, having to reach out to folks. And usually that involves getting several attorneys onto the phones, developing a document that has to be submitted, signed off, reviewed. So it takes some time. We've been able to expedite that time, but if we have something where it's an unforeseen event and we need action immediately, there would be delay. So I think delay in any scenario, especially if you're in an extreme scenario or on the verge of one, is always sort of the enemy. So if we can minimize that delay and in some cases have the ability for a retroactive, it would be potentially difficult, but either a standing type of order, if you declare such and such, you're going to be exempt from any liability. If we could have something to that standing, we've actually thought about that for things like a true system restoration event. If we had every generator off in the system, we have plans to restart those generators. With some of them, when they come back online, they need to operate at very low output levels. And when they do that, they actually create more emissions. They may not be able to run. So could we get a 202C order? Yes, for every unit. Could take some time. And what if the communications are down? So that becomes another concern. So if we could have something like that would create a blanket break glass 202C for everybody type of order, that would be wonderful. Again, only for those extreme scenario, but that would be my ask.
Well, I'm big on priority setting and being able to do things and no one has to be done, but having to not go through so many levels to get something done. I loved when the governor would call a state of emergency, because I could say, okay, go get it, go do it. We knew what was best, but when you have to go through layer, you're delaying. You may be causing people's lives to be compromised, and that's probably the only queen for a day thing I could think of, except for other things in my life. But and I'm old enough to remember queen for a day.
One last question. Go ahead, Craig.
Mary Ann, if you were CEO of PSEG, what would be the first thing you'd change? We just made you CEO.
more nuclear power. Take advantage of that site that you have that's been already approved by the NRC and build. Build, baby, build.
Thank you.
All right, let's thank Chris and Mariana. Thanks everybody for the questions, and it is just 12:30, so appreciate everybody's interaction and also patience today as we've gone through the morning. I think I stole one break from you earlier, so I want to get you out to lunch on time. So please enjoy. We have lunch, a nice lunch out here, and a nice place to have it right across behind the buffet, and we'll see you in an hour. Thank you. Hi, I'd like to welcome everybody back from lunch. I hope you enjoyed it. Food was good. Thank you. Thanks again to our TVA hosts. And we'll get started for the afternoon session.
Is it on?
Right now it's on, but it's just that. Yeah, I'll give you a quick intro and then I'll just hand this to you. But you guys want to come up? I'm gonna welcome to the stage now. Thanks for being back. Hope everybody enjoyed lunch. We're starting our afternoon session. We're pleased to be joined by Amy Henry, Director of Innovation and Research at TVA, and Craig Cremium, the Vice President for Transmission Systems Operations at Exelon. We're going to be talking about the topic won't be quite as narrow as this, increasing backup power capacity at transmission substations. Maybe a better title would be increasing resilience at transmission and transmission substations. But Amy, as befits her title, is going to talk a little bit about looking at the approach of innovative solutions, new technologies, new developments, new standards, and Craig is going to hit his operations background to talk about where did the standards that we have now come from? What can we do to, from an operations perspective, make those more resilient? So I'll turn it over to Craig and Amy. I think we'll start with Amy, and then as per the earlier sessions, we'd really like some participation. So I'll turn it over to these guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, everybody. Hope everyone had a great lunch. It's been a great conference session, thought-provoking so far. I'm Amy Henry. I'm the Director of Innovation and Research at TVA. So I've been at TVA 17 years, started out in the environmental compliance side of the business. My background is science, biology, wildlife science. I'm not an engineer, but I really enjoy any kind of collaborative problem solving and the kind of thinking that we're doing here today. So it's really exciting to be here. The innovation and research team at TVA works across all sectors of the business, so generation, transmission, environment, distribution, customer solutions. And our job is really to sort of look for the gaps in capabilities that research can help address. So we are looking out for new technologies, new business models, new approaches. Sometimes it's technology that's not terribly new to others, but it hasn't been tried at TVA. So we vet those ideas, we consider how we might prove something out, prove a use case, demonstrate that if possible, and then make recommendations for scaling up. Improving safety and resiliency is one of the 5 main research drivers that we have now. We are looking for any solutions that could help improve resiliency and safety. So I think that falls into everything that we're talking about here. How do we bring our grid back up faster after an outage? How do we predict those outages better? How do we prepare ourselves for that? And how do we prepare our communities for that? So we've been working in all of those areas. I can talk about some specific examples of those in a moment. But Craig, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself. And
We're good. Thank you, Amy. So Craig Cremium, I'm with Exelon. I've spent most of my career in ComEd. Currently, though, as an Exelon employee, I have the transmission control rooms for ComEd, Baltimore Gas and Electric, Philadelphia Electric, and the Pepco holding companies, so out in the Mid-Atlantic as well. And I want to talk a little bit about, if you go back to the Iberian Peninsula, right? So that blacked out, and Chris, that's not what we're talking about here. That was an easy restoration, right? I mean, there wasn't a storm going on. They didn't have a cyber event. They didn't have damaged equipment, nothing was on fire, there wasn't a concurrent wildfire. So relatively, they knew exactly what they had, in relative terms, right? And so, the communication and the control systems at all the substations, boy, our protocols for that basically to have at least 8 hours, usually up to 24 hours worth of battery backup at a substation. You have, redundant battery systems, chargers, two offshore or offsite power sources in there. That serves us very, very well for that. I think we're all real comfortable with that design is very robust. But as we start talking about one of these EMP in a situation like the black sky, that 24 hours no longer holds, right? And then also back to the Geonome presentation we saw is that basically in a major event like that, the chaos, right, and the lack of communication, the ability to get places on roads or people being available and stuff, all of our conventional methods kind of break down, right? And so I know a lot of us have some things like, well, we have some generators, mobile generators that we can run to substations if we have problems with the batteries or so forth. Well, that works great when you have a single substation issue or a couple substation issues. You got your incident command, you got your field forces, and you have the resources to apply to it. But in this black sky event, that will be such a, like I said, that's just one of a billion things, and can you do that? So I think that what we really need to look at, and I'd like to see us move, and I'm pushing for, is to pair solar and battery at substations, right? Because like a lot of these, some of the home battery systems you see, right, they can almost be self-sufficient between the size of the batteries you can put at your house and the solar on your house and so forth. And so you could go for literally days without having to, say, all right, if we lost, all off-site power, the batteries drained down, we can't get anybody out there to run a generator and so forth. Matter of fact, we don't even want to deal with that at this type of thing. So is there an opportunity to use, solar and battery combo, which with the type of loads that we're looking at to be able to run the control systems and communication systems, it fits pretty well with the size of a battery and solar type of system. So I think that that's a good opportunity for us. I will say that coming from the utility side, everybody that's not in the utility side, I just want to reiterate, there's three big things that's facing us right now: affordability, and affordability. And so with that, we have to think, there's plenty of great things. We have a list of tremendously valuable things to do that we cannot fund, right? So again, trying to look at something is, what can we do, right? What should we do, and what can we do? And something even, and as much as I don't like being in operations, that when you get into a chaos situation, like I said, you don't want to have to do a bunch of one-off plays, right? You want to run standard type of, everybody has a very standard play to run, but really like to get possibly, you could get a mobile setup, right? Mobile battery, solar battery combo pack or something. And if you could just have a quick connect set up at your substations, and possibly, that's maybe a cheap entry point to say, hey, we want to go this direction till we get there. Maybe it's a series of mobile equipment of the like. So,
yeah, I couldn't agree more on the affordability part, and kind of a specific example on that from our standpoint. And you said, what could we do? What should we do? Our group looks at a technology. Can it work? Can we adopt it? And should we adopt it? So, like, does a technology work? Is it operational? And then the business case of that technology. Can we integrate it into our systems? Can we afford it? Can it, does it disrupt anything else that we've got going? As a resiliency option, TVA has been working with the DOE and EPRI and a couple of other partners to test out a flexible transformer. So this wouldn't be a substation backup solution, but it would be a replacement transformer if you have one knocked out for whatever reason. And instead of being a very specific design and configuration, this one would have multiple configurations. It would be able to plug in in multiple substations if you needed it. So we've worked through the concept of that, and originally it was going to be on wheels and it was going to drive around and be really mobile, and we figured out that's probably not going to work that way. So we are settling for kind of, well, it could be moved, maybe not as easily as being on wheels all the time. So the design has changed a little bit as we've gone through it, and they have worked through, and we believe we've got a feasible design that would work. So it can work. But it's probably no surprise to anyone in this room that when they start calculating up the cost of building that thing, it's going to be prohibitive in most cases. I mean, it's going to be a problem. So you'd have to really, really, really want that solution to pay for it. And I guess one of the questions that we might mull over today, people in the room, how do you build a business case for something like that that's very expensive? How do you make a rate case for that? How do you get the nod from your regulators or whomever you're explaining to? We really need this on hand for a possible outage, a possible blackout in case it happens. You're really going to want it. We're not going to use it every day, and so those expensive cases are difficult to get approval for sometimes.
Well, Amy, you're lucky that you don't work for Exelon, because we've got the Baltimore and Philadelphia. We've got the main ship ports there, and ship Navy yards and stuff. And I heard Greg earlier say that the aircraft carrier has 135 megawatts. I wrote 135 megawatts that they could provide a shore power for me. I'm like, boy, I got to make a connection at somewhere on my dock for that, because I could use. Mike, can I use that 135 megawatts somewhere in the Baltimore area? So
that'd be a really interesting vehicle to grid solution, wouldn't it? I mean, we're all thinking a little bit about electric vehicles, buses. We've been trying out buses and cars and seeing if their batteries could ever supply energy to the grid, but an aircraft carrier to the grid would be pretty cool. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just going to say, so again, we want to get some. Amy kind of asked the rhetorical question, but we want to make it a real question. Like, how do we get to that next step? How can we fund innovation in these kind of areas? And I wanted to. So I'm going to go back. Yeah. I'm going to let that percolate for a second.
Sure.
But I wanted to ask, just to clarify, when you're talking about the transformer design that you're talking about, was it originally mobile, but now it It isn't, and it's just it's reconfigurable, but in place.
It's still the concept would still be that you could move it around to two different locations, depending, because you have some ability to predict where a problem might happen, but not great foresight. So you would want it to be able to move wherever you needed it and try to give it the range of configurations that would be most applicable to your situations. But I guess there's always the risk that you lose something that it's not applicable for, and then you're not able to use it. So it was originally so mobile that it would have wheels, but they've decided not to do that. I think too heavy. It's going to be too heavy.
Yeah, Amy, you talked about, how do you justify that? And at EIS, I think we've been talking about, in fact, Avi would probably like me to stop talking about it, but this idea of how do you justify resilience?
Right.
How do you, and Missy talked a little bit this morning about some of those metrics that I think TVA has developed, the NATF TRMM program, which I think goes part of the way to saying if we can start quantifying it, we might be able to then translate to benefit. So I think there's some really good work there that we need to try to capitalize on, because
definitely
it's going to be difficult to justify some of this stuff, particularly with the very, very strong and legitimate affordability message out there.
I agree completely, and I think especially for TVA, who doesn't make rate cases to regulators, but we do answer, to the public. How do you get it into the public's mind that this is resiliency. This is an insurance policy. This is to make sure that you're not out of power for however long it might happen. We maintain a research partnership with the University of Tennessee Baker School of Public Policy, and they have done a survey of residents asking their willingness to pay for resiliency. And the question comes out something like, would you be willing to pay a few more dollars on your bill if you had less minutes of outage every year? And they ran this survey maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and probably comes as no surprise to anybody in this room. Most people said, no, I wouldn't really want to pay anything more for that. So then they redid the survey after this recent ice storm, especially in the Nashville area. Results are preliminary, but and I see Ben is like, still most people not really willing to pay extra dollars for extra resiliency, even after they've experienced a pretty significant multi-day outage. So it's, we understand the case, we understand what we're doing here, why we would invest in this, but I think making sure that the public understands why is this important.
Amy, I'm not sure, would they do a societal cost of the Nashville ice storm?
I'm phoning a friend. Ben, did they do that?
For the Nashville ice storm, did anyone do a societal cost of the ice storm? A lot of times after major storms says, hey, society, we lost $1 billion, or whatever the loss was, because part of the problem, right, is that the cost of what we need to do to harden the system and so forth and it comes right to the utilities and right to the customers, ratepayers, so forth. However, all the benefits of not doing that go out there. So we just never get to the point where like I said, we have plenty of cost benefit justification. It's just that they don't flow to the same spot, and so nobody's going to sign up for the cost when they're not getting any of the benefit.
Not to my knowledge. I know Metro Nashville government has a commission that is looking at the ice storm, because I interviewed with them last month to go through recommendations, but I don't know that societal costs, it should, but, and I am not aware of any level of that effort at the state at the moment.
There's a question over here.
So just as I'm transitioning, I just want to give Amy a shout out. That's pro-level panel participant right there, to pull someone out of the audience and ask them a question. That was good stuff.
Hi, I'm Sarah Ricky. You mentioned that you have a background in risk, and somebody talked about quantification, using the right metrics and all. Right. But you come up with a very real issue when you're going out to the public to ask to pay for a few dollars. Now that's a very real thing, because the public is made up of all types of people. That's right. So they have different risk appetites and different risk tolerances, etc. Is there a way to reach out to the private sector, somehow make it attractive to them, as far as them getting some kind of monetization of this resilience, so that they see some ROI and they come in and invest? Some rich people, maybe. So I don't know. I'm just thinking.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I'm potentially. So I think to invest in the system, to get corporations and people to invest in the system, maybe. But I know that we've got businesses who are convinced that their power quality and their power reliability is really important to them, so much that they would pay for it. We have programs, I'm sure you guys have programs with your corporate customers, where they'll have a resiliency program. We've got one called Resiliency 360, where there's shared natural gas or shared generators. We're trying to expand that out to best systems for resiliency, but that's just for a specific manufacturer or business. It's not resiliency for the system. So maybe that's something that this organization can work on, in presenting system resiliency as a societal benefit for investment. I don't know of a model like that. Anybody know of any models for that? it's a good direction to look in.
I think there were some people that, you mentioned the Baker School at Tennessee. Is anyone, I thought someone was here from there, if anyone is and wants to comment on the study. All right, I'll leave that open.
Not right now.
Okay, I thought they were here. Craig, I wanted to ask you just on the specific, going back to backup power at substations, and just kind of given this discussion, even something as, I would say, kind of straightforward as that, and you're talking about we're going from battery to battery plus solar, just as a kind of an incremental step, but definitely another layer in resilience, because you have the ability to have kind of natural recharging. You're going to get some cycling there. Is that something that, but going back to your affordability, is even that a challenge?
Yes, absolutely. The one benefit going for us is that, that's relatively a small, and when you're talking in transmission spend, that's a very, very small dollar amount. And also with some of the projects, like Yuri mentioned, it takes a year to get a big power class transformer. I want to know where he's getting them.
Yeah.
They're way longer than a year. So a lot of these project timelines slip, and then end of budget years, there's some funding come available. So that's basically the opportunity area, is just really in the to fit the pebbles into between the big stones if there's some shifts in there.
Thank you. David.
Hi, David Winks. Just two quick questions. One, in terms of the batteries and solar that you're thinking about for the substations, how much power are we talking about?
Substation, probably 20 kW continuous.
Okay. So it's not, you're not powering the neighborhood, you're just powering the actual substation electronics itself.
Yep.
Okay. The question on the transformers, I think maybe 2 years ago, Yoshi had brought some folks from the Ukraine, and they were doing transformer replacements. They were doing three one-phase transformers instead of a single three-phase transformer, and it might be a lot easier to transport, maybe more configurable. Have you looked into that?
I don't know if the team has checked on that, but I'll take that back to them and see if they've considered that in their design. I think they're looking for all the possibilities. We are scanning and looking for the equipment type of solutions for this battery, or for the substation powering. I don't know that we've found any silver bullets yet. We're still looking. But I think what we are finding, the opportunities in research to sort of improve things, come in the planning and the preparation phases, very similar to what we were talking about this morning with the genome process, especially when you get into the looking holistically across the sectors and involving the communities. So we've had two projects recently that are along those lines. One was here in Nashville, and it was a modeling exercise that took population data down to the neighborhood level and simulated a week-long power outage and looked at the impacts of that, and then really predicted the sort of the human impact. So which neighborhoods would be most vulnerable, who would be out of resources the fastest, and then it gave the city some actionable insights to, if this happens, where are we going to stage equipment, where are we going to start responding first, who are we going to look out for. So it's that kind of planning, I think, that we're seeing. There could be some advances, better. It's not preventing, again, somebody mentioned that today, but it might be better response.
And was that shared with the city? Or
the city was a stakeholder, yeah.
Okay.
So they helped. Was that shared with the state? I'd have to go back and check, Ben. Yeah. We had a range of stakeholders there. was done a couple years ago, so I can check on that for you.
Well, I think you hit on a much broader topic, which is that it's sort of like finding a market, finding a demand for resilience is hard.
Yeah.
Is that something that, like, it would seem that I think the description you gave, Amy, is even if you kind of gave an example of an avoided cost, or even after a disaster, you're finding that when you ask people, they're still saying, nah, that was worth it. Is that kind of the feedback you're getting? Is like, are we in a situation where we can't expand, or we're having challenges to expand resilience because there's no demand for it?
Good question, and I think deserves some more looking into. I think the Baker School's recent report is still preliminary. We can share some insights once we hear the final back, but I think what they're hearing from their respondents is, yes, I think it's important. I don't want to suffer through an outage like that, but I also don't really want to pay extra. So there's a disconnect there.
Okay. Chris, we've got a strategic oil reserve. We should have a strategic transformer reserve.
Right.
So,
I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
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 There are proposals for that, actually, that EIS has been involved in the past. So good point, Craig. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Are you looking at solid state transformers at all? The advantage, of course, is lower weight and better portability.
We are looking at we have a project that's a collaboration with some of our distributors, looking at a solid state solution for distribution level transformer. So I think it's still early stages, just looking at, that's in our technical testing. Can it work? And then you would move into, well, where would you integrate it? What's the use case? But yes, interesting technology.
And Craig, I just wanted to circle back with, like, as you kind of looked at the just all the way back to the battery backup at a substation, that you're looking at the solar plus battery to try to extend that life. When you did your initial investigation we sort of inherent some of these standards where it's like, well, we got 8 hours of battery backup and that's kind of the standard, or whatever, wherever those were set. Did you find those, and is that part of the challenge? Is like, where did the initial benchmark get set, and if no one knows where, it's hard to move it?
Well, the answer is yes to both of that, because there's really no hard requirement on hours, right? I think PJM maybe has the firmest guidance, which is at least 8 hours, right? But then, for anything on the cranking path and stuff, we're all up probably 24 hours type of systems and redundancy and so forth. Again, so each utility is probably off on their own to determine where they want to be in this greater than 8 hour kind of guide mark. Now, there's certainly all kinds of standards on, redundancy, maintenance, monitoring, health of, and so forth, but strict hour, there isn't. And again, we really not needed it because, generally if you're in this 8 to 24 hours, anything that's come up or we've handled before, that's a pretty good number, right? But just not accommodating for a big black sky event like we're talking about here. So that's where the paradigm changes.
Okay, thank you. Question over here.
Hi, Amy, I understand that you're a scientist and not an engineer, and also, but I've been around a bunch of engineers for a long time, but I'm curious about benchmarking in other industries, because it sounds like you have a marketing problem. For instance, I don't know, and I've talked to my family members. I come from a management background, and I told them I'm going to attend this conference about an event, and I explained it this morning, is that what happens when the lights go out and stay out for a couple of weeks?
Right.
What are we going to do? how are you benchmarking with other industries? In particular, I'm thinking about the mRNA story of pharma, to be able to say, I can solve a problem in a tremendous amount of time because we've been working on it for a while, that now we can bring a solution to the forefront. I'm curious, is that benchmarking taking place, maybe at TVA or in the industry overall?
Well, I got to say that we do value partnerships outside of the electric industry, but I don't know that anybody's thought about an approach like that. It's not been in my view, but it's a great idea to think about other things that people sort of pay ahead for or pay for avoided costs. So it's a great idea. I think it's something we should think about.
Okay, I think we got time for one more.
Okay.
So this is going back to substations. Did I hear that each substation is, you're looking at about 20 kW for backup generators?
Just for the control systems and the communications, yeah.
Okay, just for controls. All right. So you're not like trying to power the lines again from there?
No. No. So we're in a black start situation, right? So the grid's entirely dead. But, you know, to bring it back, we don't want to have people out there, right? We want to be in our control room, be able to see the status of, you know, the breakers, you know, everything, and be able to control it, right, to bring the grid back up. Right. So that's the key. The first step is just that we got to have, you know, visibility and control systems to bring the grid back up. So that's step one.
Right. And then the other question. When you guys were talking to the communities about what would you be willing to pay, right? Have you ever sent a model out to them to show them, hey, this is what we'd have to do. This is how fast we could get you back online. Yeah. You've tried all that?
No, well, no, we have not. So this was not a study that TVA ran. This was a study from one of our research partners, the UT Baker School, and they investigate energy policy and environmental policy. So they were just interested in knowing what people thought, and they shared the results with us. And you know, we thought we can apply that here.
I will confirm. So not just UT, our utilities have done the same type of studies or reached out to others for studies like that and get the exact same result.
There's one other area of research that we're kind of looking at with respect to being prepared, and that is just changing weather patterns. You know, we are partnering with Oak Ridge National Lab and also another study with the National Lab of the Rockies, where they're doing some more granular and more predictive weather patterns. Things are changing. We can't always rely on the weather that we've experienced in the past. So we're trying to get a better handle on understanding that. Chris is motioning.
Yeah, I'm getting more questions, but I need to move on to the next panel, but I appreciate it. And
yeah,
I want to say,
we'll be around.
Please follow up. Thank you to Amy and Craig.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll ask our next panelists. Thank you. All right, we're going to shift to a related topic, the gas electric nexus. I'm welcoming Dwayne Fulis from Reliability First, Chris Pylong, who we met earlier today from PJM, and Kimberly Denbo from the American Gas Association. I think we're going to start off with an overview by Dwayne, and then get into the discussion portion. And just if you want to, you can use the podium or you can use this. And down is advance. The down arrow is advance the slides. Thanks, Dwayne.
All right. Good afternoon. I hope everybody's still awake. It's right after lunch. We had a great lunch. What I want to talk about is we're going to talk about the gas electric nexus, but I'm going to talk about a report that was written. I helped lead this project, and we actually talked to generators, we talked to transmission owners, we talked transmission operators, generators, reliability coordinators, everybody, to kind of get some of this information. And I'm just going to talk about the recommendations, a quick report. If you can grab it, you can grab it. But I'm going to promise I'm going to give you one line for each one of these recommendations. This is recommendation 1 through 5. When we talk about it, I grayed it out on purpose because I don't want to talk about these ones really, but they are important. You'll see the one that we're going to talk about, and this is the one that the three of us will have this discussion on. Recommendation 1 was just about black start resources that were relied upon for system restoration plans. And we've heard about this, right? We're talking about a black sky event. And I kind of want to preface this report was written based on a cold weather day, extreme cold weather day based on Winter Storm Elliott. So we kind of based it on that cold weather. Considerations for that fuel failure. Is it going to be there? We don't know. So that's one of the things that we wanted everybody to start considering when they start looking at their black start plans. The qualification process for black start resources. What is it? Do you have a good one? Are you looking at their cold weather their cold weather data? Are they going to be able to operate? Critical loads, and if you ask a system operator today what their critical load is, they're going to tell you EMS, fire stations, police stations, and hospitals. Well, we know those are important, right? But all 4 of those have backup generators to keep them operating and keep them going, and a lot of their stuff comes through radio. Critical loads being, when we talk about this, the gas system. You have to re-electrify the gas system so that it can help support the electric system. So that's kind of where that recommendation came from. And then startup and operation. How do they start up? How long does it take? How long does it take to switch fuels if they have a fuel switch that they have available? And then mitigation for black start resource fuel emission restriction. And I think Chris kind of hit on this a little bit earlier. Those restrictions, on a good day, we have those restrictions, but what does it mean when we get into that black sky event? Recommendation 6. Now this is what we're going to talk about today, and this is what's important. There was a precedent study, or the study that was completed in Texas, the ERCOT region, from Winter Storm Uri, that we kind of said, yes, this is exactly what needs to happen, and this is what we're going to talk about today. But this is the relevance of that gas and electric coordination. It's starting to happen, and we're starting to see a lot of traction, but we feel that there needs to be a little bit more traction. And it's funny, the story behind this recommendation, it took us 3 days to write this recommendation. When we were writing, and when I say 3 days, 3 full days to write this recommendation. We wrote it, we rewrote it, and then we finally landed on this. What we think is important is that coordination when it comes down to it. Coordination between gas and electric. What's important? What do we need to get powered back into the gas system so that the gas system can continue to help or continue to support the electric system in a black sky event? Very important, right? We've got to work together. And we said SMEs, not, and I'm going to pick on Mike Bryson because I know him, not the VPs, not the directors, not let them sit on the back wall and make sure that they're following the policies and stuff. Let the people that need to know and need to do this on a daily basis talk about this. How do they figure it out? And then go back and do the policies, the procedure part with the VPs and the directors and stuff like that. It's important that, and we felt it was very important that we hit on that and hit on that very, very hard, because while I'm one of the regional entities in the U.S., I could say, oh yeah, this is how it goes. Mike Bryson could say, oh yeah, this is how it should go, but when it gets down to the desk level or that operator for electric or the operator for the gas, whoever it is, they're the ones that know the ins and outs of everything and how everything's going to work. So we were very specific on that. So I want to be very clear that it was for the SMEs to get in the room and start talking about this. And then it filters back up rather than, I think we talked about it earlier, Matt Duncan talked about it, it's going to have to go top down. We believe this one goes bottom up because of the actual impacts. 3 other recommendations really quick. Fuel supply contracts and delivery infrastructure. And this is specifically for Black Start Resources. What does that look like? When it comes down to it, what does that look like? Do they need firm contracts? Do those contracts even matter in a black sky event? There's other pieces to that when it comes down to it. What's the fuel risk? We've got a lot of, and I know PJM, for instance, has fuel assured units because they have the 2 units, and we did talk about that in this. Having that extra fuel capability is a great aspect. Priorities for black start scenarios, or delivery priorities, sorry. And we're not just talking about the gas system, but we're talking about that backup fuel. How can they get refueled? Communication systems aren't going to be up and running as great as we all pretend that they're going to be when we were at our black start plans and stuff like that. So what does that actually look like? How do we get people on the roads? No stoplights, nothing like that. How do we get people on the roads to keep these units running? What communication risks? And we talked about it. We've been talking about this. How often have we talked about this? But what's going to be running, or what communication channels are going to be available when it comes down to it? When we have a black sky event, cell towers aren't going to have power. It might come down to sat phones. And I think I had a conversation earlier. Do you remember the numbers that you have to call? Do you have them written down somewhere in case your computer's not on, or in case you don't have access to whatever your numbers are in? So do you have those numbers written down? And then maintenance, testing, and fuel switching capabilities. And we thought this was kind of important too. Obviously, you have to maintain your unit. You have to test your unit. But the piece that we saw missing when we came up with this recommendation was the fact that the fuel switching wasn't necessarily tested. How long does it take to switch fuels? If I'm running on natural gas and we black out, how long there's a black sky event and the system blacks out, how long does it take to switch from that natural gas to whatever my backup fuel is? Is it feasible? And the reason that we think this is important is because the transmission operators, transmission owners, they need to understand the capability as they write their plans, so that when they write their plans, they're actually hitting the right spots. And I think, and then Black Start Resource System Restoration Training. And what we hit here, and this is kind of I like to think outside the box on at least one recommendation when I'm working on a report. This is having those field personnel come in and sit through the Black Start restoration training so they understand what that operator's looking at when they call them on the radio and say, hey, do this or do this or do this, and then vice versa. So if there's a generator that has that type of training, have the operators go out to them and talk to that generation station, or sit and just observe so that they understand exactly what's happening. Because a lot of times, I was an operator for 5 years. I had no clue what those generators did when I called them up. I had no clue. I mean, I knew what I was telling them to do physically, but to see them do it, I think it's better than talking back and forth on the phone. The report was published last year, November of last year. It is located on the NERC website, and you can find it. There is a lot of information in there. I covered it really high level so that we could actually talk rather than me talk. I want us to talk. and you guys to ask us questions. So it's there, and I'll leave that there. Actually, I'm going to go back to recommendation 6 because that's what we're going to talk about. See if I can get back without messing this up. There you go.
Thank you, Dwayne. Let me just before we I just want to go next to Kimberly. So just and kind of let you cook on the on just the general top level finding of the necessity for gas electric coordination, and especially what it means in system planning. So I know you've kind of talked about that in previous conversations that we've had, but I think that folks would benefit from you spelling that out a little bit.
Thank you, Chris. So you did say cook, so I'm assuming everyone's cooking with natural gas. So again, my name is Kimberly Denbo. I'm Vice President of Security and Operations at the American Gas Association. We represent over 200 energy utilities across the United States, and there's about 79 million residential, commercial, and industrial natural gas users, of which 90, thank you, I saw that hand raised, he's quite proud of it. 94% of that population, that large community, is represented by AGA members. So that's one of the reasons that Chris invited me here to speak, plus the fact that now you can have a token natural gas person at an electric conference. So I'm always up for that. I love the opportunity.
You are hardly a token person. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me just start by saying, of all things, we are in this together. And I was saying this to Dwayne yesterday, or maybe it was today. I don't know. Everything blends together nowadays because we have so many meetings. I don't even know. Are we in a virtual meeting right now? But when we are all part of an intricate energy system. And I say this word system intentionally because society, media, politicians, however you want to put it, will like to peg us against each other. It's gas versus electric. And it shouldn't be. It should be, you need a diversified energy portfolio, which means all of the above. And yes, right now, natural gas-fired power generation is about 40% of it comes from power generation comes from about 40% natural gas-fired generators. So yes, we have an integral role to play in not just everyday system energy reliability, but a huge role to play in Black Start. And so how we are trying to address this now, recognizing, and I don't mean this jokingly, but it is kind of jokingly, gas is from Mars and electric is from Venus. We speak very, very different languages. We are governed by very different models. And the biggest model that governs us, that we have no control over and that we have to respect, is physics. Unless you want to have an MMA battle with Sir Isaac Newton, you've got to accept the fact that electric is electrons and gas is molecules, and they are not the same. And as a result, how we work together requires this collaboration, this coordination, and this conversation during the blue sky days. And one thing that I will touch on, should time permit, is how we are actually doing that right now in real time. And I just came from the Natural Gas Readiness Forums, which AGA administers, and I'll give a little bit more detail about that in a bit. But we are actually bringing together the electric folks, the gas folks, the regulators, the policymakers, and trying to be that Google translator for everyone in that safe environment during a blue sky, so that those business cards are exchanged and those smoke signals are exchanged, because Lord knows if the telecom goes out, smoke signaling is what we're going to have to learn how to do. So if that's okay with my opening remarks, I'd like to go ahead and pass it on.
Thank you. That's a tough act to follow, but I will say, but literally everything you said is spot on, and completely agree with it. It is all about.
You'll have what she's having?
Yes.
Okay.
The coordination, the communication, the collaboration are absolutely key. And I can tell you, we've been talking about the general gas electric coordination for what feels like forever, but I mean, at least in depth for at least 15 plus years. And we still continue to learn new things. And it is the collaboration, it is the communication on the blue sky days. And I'm seeing some of these recommendations here, and they're, you know, one, they're not a surprise. We've seen this report before, but they're spot on. And we thought about from the electric side, well, if we just have enough black start to supply compression for the gas system, everything will be fine. That's all we need to do to coordinate on. Well, no. We've learned through communication, collaboration, and site visits that what people may not be aware of is you can't just take gas out of the ground and dump it into a generator. It's got to go through processing, gathering. All of that takes time. It takes coordination. It takes power, electricity in some instances, and being sure that we're all thinking about that and understanding that, and how does that really work from the true system restoration? Because while there will be pressure in the pipelines initially after that, the blackout occurs, that pressure is not going to stay there indefinitely. So we want to have the compression. That's good, but you think about, you know, if you're at your house and you shut off the main water valve, you can turn on your spigot. You're going to get some water for a little bit. If you have it at a trickle, it'll last for a bit, but it's not indefinite. You got to somehow get that supply coming back into your house, and you can't just go pull that out of the local pond. You've got to have the coordination to make sure that you can get that water. The same thing from a natural gas perspective, and thinking through all of that and learning more every meeting that we have, every discussion we have, and trying to build that into the full plan. So not just from the gas side or just from the electric side. And it's complicated because it's not just, oh, a pipeline does this. It's all of the players in that not to use a pun, but in the pipeline of getting the gas from the wellhead to the generator, just like it is from getting power from a black start resource, getting the grid stood back up, and getting that to end-use customers, including pipelines. So I will pause there.
I would say yes, just like on the electric side, and I will not pretend to understand electric other than to not stick a wet finger into the electric socket, is you've got your production or your generation, right? You've got your transmission, and then you have your distribution. That's your electric. On the gas, you've got your production, that's your wellheads. You've got your refining and all that stuff, that's all upstream. You've got your midstream, which is your transmission, and then you have your distribution. It's the same. And just as it is different segments of the electric sector, there's different segments of the natural gas sector. And so when one segment goes down, really no one says, damn, the transmission electric is so bad. They say, damn, electric sucks, or damn, gas sucks. They don't say, those damn wellheads, they aren't working. No one says that. They just blame the entire system, which is why I say we are in this all together.
I just wanted to ask you, so just come around full circle, Dwayne. I have some follow-ups, but anything from your colleagues' discussion there that you wanted to?
I have nothing. Go ahead.
So
you got my point of view.
Okay. Oh, we're done. Thank you.
So I wanted to just go into specifics, like you said, Dwayne, and looking at A sub I, distinguishing between critical customer loads and system restoration critical loads, which includes natural gas supply, processing, storage, and delivery facilities. So I wanted to ask you guys each to kind of unpack that a little bit, because I think Kimberly just talked about there's sort of parallel parts to the systems, but critical loads to one aren't the same as the other. I don't think typically that a critical load for electric would be a gas pumping station or a relay station. Usually critical loads are I think a little bit larger. Similarly, there's historical precedent that households and heating is thought of as kind of the first
priority for gas and then electric generation. So but we're here because we want to get on the same page. So I wanted to just say, what does critical load mean to you, and what part of it from the gas side to the electric and electric to gas should we pay most attention to, or do we need the most coordination for? Easy question.
So this is critical loads, critical customer loads is kind of a new term. We didn't coin the term, but we tried to put that critical load for the gas system. And it takes the whole gas system, just like it takes a whole team to get something done. And I think that's when we looked at this. We looked at the fact we did talk to the gas industry in this report. So that's where we got the whole let's go from the processing to the storage to delivery and supply. All of that whole supply chain when we came down to it, because what we didn't want to happen was hit part of it and drain it and have nothing to refill it. So we felt that the whole piece of that system was a critical load when it came down to it.
Yes, maybe I can go next here. So on the electric side, it can mean actually a couple different things. So critical customers kind of come into play when you talk about having to do, say, load shed. You have to pick between a hospital and, say, a house. You might have to pick the hospital. It's a little bit different, though, when we talk about restoration. So from the PJM perspective, when it comes to system restoration, we have critical loads, and they're really three things. One of them is nuclear safe shutdown, so how many megawatts to shut down a nuclear unit. The second one would be the megawatts needed to start up a generator. So not every generator, if you're not aware of this, most generators can't start without an outside source of power. So we look at the generators that can start quickly with less than 4 hours of time. How many megawatts do they need to start? Add all of those up. That's our second category that we need black start megawatts for. And then the third category that we have is for natural gas compression that is using essentially the electric grid for the compression. So those become our three critical customers, and making sure that we have enough black start to serve each one of those categories within each of our kind of transmission owner zones. So using TVA or Tennessee like as an example, which is not part of PJM, but we would count all of those megawatts up. We would then say, we actually want to have a little extra. So we go for 110%. And we want to have at least 2 generators that can actually supply those megawatts. The more the better, the more that you can start with. You have a more resilient system. But that becomes our critical load customers. But you'll notice what I didn't say in there was anything about water, anything about telecom, sewage, or more specifically, anything on the gas pipeline that is not electrical or electrical compression. So all of the other electricity that's needed would, in theory, need to be coordinated now, not with PJM, which is operating the transmission system, but with the distribution companies. Now you're bringing in additional players into the mix. And that's the area where I think there is room for additional improvement.
So you said 2 magic words, electric compression. And so for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, natural gas, historically, it moves by pressure. That's how it moves through the system. And so it travels 50 or so, no, I can't remember how many miles apart the compressor stations are, but let's just say a few hundred miles apart. And then it gets compressed again, more pressure behind it, and then it pushes the gas molecule along. If you were a CH4 molecule, that's where you get an extra push behind you, and then you go another few hundred miles, another compressor station pushes you along. Well, we used to run natural gas compressor stations off of natural gas. It made the most sense. That was our fuel. You use that to run your system. Well, environmental policies came out which helped solve emission problems, but created the unintended consequence of reliability. Because what that did was it required operators to switch from natural gas-fired compressor stations to electric compressor stations. So now what we've created is a cleaner environment, but at the expense of reliability. And so now we have a circular dependency, which is what Dwayne opened up with, which is this critical load or critical facility even, where you need to know is your electricity providing the electricity for that compressor station that is actually pushing the gas through, that's creating the electricity for your generator? So thanks to policies that were created in a vacuum, despite certain people like me yelling, don't do that, that's a challenge, not a problem, but it's a challenge that we have ahead of us, actually that we're with right now, that we need to confront. And so that's where many of these conversations are happening at the PJM level with the pipeline operators, with the distribution. When I say pipeline, midstream, high pressure, distribution, gas utility, I'll call it gas utility so it doesn't get confused with electric distribution. That's where those conversations are actually being had now, so that if you have, for example, rolling brownouts, that's not one of the systems that gets rolled into the brownout. And also from the gas perspective, we don't come back, we can't go offline that way. We don't have rolling brownouts, we just have on and off. And so for us, once the pilot lights go out, then we actually have to touch that meter twice. We have to go out, touch the meter, shut it off, make sure all of the appliances in the house is turned off, all the gas appliances, test, pipeline integrity test, all the pipeline systems in the area, then go out and manually turn the meter back on and manually relight every single one of those appliances. This is why I say it's governed by physics. It's not governed by, it can't be governed by policy in a vacuum. And this is why sometimes the electric side is like, okay, we can do the brownouts, we'll take the hit, because they know if they don't, it's going to be a much worse hit on the gas side. Now with the gas like that, we build the resilience into our system. We have the line pack. That's where, if you get to an elevator, you can always squeeze that one extra person in, especially if that person's cute. You can always squeeze that one extra person in. But the question is that you want to remember is that elevator went to the lowest bid. And what is the weight capacity of that elevator? And so pipelines operate at a design lower than what is allowed, by design, at a pressure lower than what's allowed by design. But with that, they can compress natural gas molecules. And then, as Chris mentioned, we can draw on that in emergencies because you've got more gas in a confined space for the purposes of backup supply and whatnot.
So I want to kind of tie both of those together. If you look at, you took I and pulled it out, but if you take that and look at what we said that what everybody needs to do, Chris hit it on the head. It's the transmission owners and the transmission operators that need to go back and talk to their distribution, make sure that they're not killing the wrong feeders when it comes down to it, so that they're not cutting their nose off despite the face. Basically, they're not cutting the gas off when it comes down to it. So it's not I alone. Yes, they need to identify them, but they need to take that back and then put it back in their plan, so that plan, especially sometimes it's just a shedding load. It's a button in the system that they can just hit. Well, we don't want gas to be that load shed. Shed the house, shed the hospital because they have a backup generator for the short time, but don't shed gas, because what's going to happen is you shed gas and then you're going to watch your generators from the end of the line start tripping because gas pressure might be going down. So that coordination needs to happen, and that's where that coordination needs to happen, and it needs to go back. Chris said it early, during the blue sky days, do this planning, because when it happens, emotions are running high and everybody just wants to get it back together, and it's not going to happen if we're running on emotions.
Follow up on that at all, Chris?
I don't know that I had anything more to add. Yes, it's sort of kind of continuing under that sort of, the same theme there with making sure that the plan works. right? And then we've thought through everything. And I think every time we do an exercise and you bring more and more people that are involved in that overall cycle to the table, you learn something, you learn something new, you find something you haven't thought about before, and you've got to make sure it gets reviewed and covered, which is why some of these are excellent recommendations.
And
what's the approximate compressor load in PJM?
I was afraid somebody's going to ask me that today. I don't know offhand what that is. I don't think I can. You don't have any friends? I have friends, but nobody's raising their hand. I'm not going to call on my boss.
I have a couple of questions. This is David Winks. Adversaries, as they look at both the natural gas system and our electric grid, the single point vulnerability are the compressor stations on the interstate pipelines. And if you look at what's happening and how Ukraine is basically dismantling Russia's gas network, they're going after those compressor stations. So how are we looking to defend those from, of course, cyber, but also things like weaponized drones, sabotage, this type of thing, to prevent cascading failures due to some adversary or anarchist in our midst?
Chrissy, do you want to answer that? No, just kidding. No, I think that's a great question. And you've got some of it, you've got most of it right. Let me massage it a little bit. And that is, the compressor stations are not necessarily that single point of failure. And the reason why is you can have a compressor station that's been disrupted. If that compressor station is completely offline, I mean, it's been blown up, then what happens is they do a detour. They build a pipeline around the compressor station, and the gas still moves through. It's just at a lower pressure. And then it gets compressed at the next station. Now, if you have multiple stations, so it's a concerted physical kinetic attack, then you have more challenges that you are faced with. At the same time, unless you are on a system, which there are not that many, but they are out there, where you don't have any other interconnected transmission systems, think of the superhighway system. And how you can sometimes get around a detour because there's other superhighway system interconnected, although it never feels like that around Washington, D.C. And so because of the interconnectedness, because there is the underground storage of natural gas, for the most part located near the market, or peak shaving facilities, LNG facilities, not the export terminals, but, and then they also have what is called, what do we call it? Virtual pipelines now, which is over-the-road pipelines, which is trucked, they truck in CNG, compressed natural gas, or they truck in LNG, and they inject that into the system downstream of the impacted area. So it's recognizing that there is the potential for that to be a single point of failure, and making sure that you have your contingencies in place. Now, all of that goes back to need to have the conversation with the customers. In this case, it would be our electric folks, or it would be the utilities downstream. Remember, the gas utility is pretty much equivalent to a power generator. We are a high volume natural gas user. And so we contract, you hear the word firm all the time. We contract for firm because our public utility commissioner, the Marianas that are out there, are going to burn our hides if we do not have a reliable natural gas system.
I'll latch on a word you said there, which was contingencies. So one of the things that we, I'm sure, all do, especially if you're on the ops side, is contingency analysis, contingency planning. So what we look at from the PJM perspective is coordinating with all of the pipelines within our footprint in advance, identify where are those compressors, whether it's electric or some are still gas supported, and what's the impact if we lose that one. And then we've done actually coordinated studies looking, I think, up to 3 or so, to see what's the impact to the pipeline and what does that mean for an impact to the electric grid. So you could have, say, 3 or 4 generators that are in the vicinity of that. Are they impacted? Because there could be gas coming from the other direction. They could have dual fuel capabilities. So we look at that ahead of time under sort of worst case scenarios, extreme peak, winter, summer. And then as we move throughout the year, we actually have, especially when we get into the winter, we have daily calls with every one of our pipelines. What's the status? What's going on? And if anything's out of the ordinary, we're getting that information. We're relaying that to our control room, preparing for what if that worst thing happens? Are we okay? Do we need to have contingency plans in place? So a lot of that coordination, understanding that gas supply side impact, how does that impact the electric side, and making sure that we have, again, plans in place for that. So there's always, to your original point, like you want to do everything you can, I'm sure, on the gas side to try to protect. Same thing on the electric side. You want to protect every asset, but you can't. So what happens when you can't protect it and it goes down? You've got to be prepared for it.
And the conversation that PJM's having with its pipelines, that conversation's happening in other ISOs and RTOs across the country. Like I said, don't trust everything you read in the media or that you hear what politicians say, because those conversations are happening. Sometimes, can they be more transparent? Of course. But can they? No, because of antitrust reasons. Because pipelines can only share so much information with one customer before it's considered impacting the market in a negative way. And that may be something that's not a concern on the electric side, but I know that on the gas side, on the pipeline side, people can go to jail for that. So even if in severe events when we want to be transparent, if it could potentially impact the market, you know what, Ben's going to jump out of his seat. You better give him the microphone. But if it's going to impact the market, our hands are tied. And so actually I've been trying to work with the federal government to say, one of the solutions we could have is maybe in such severe events, which for the most part are predictable because we have amazing meteorologists, can we get a DOJ person at the table so that we can have some type of umbrella protection for this one particular incident conversation?
So I'll add that in Tennessee, you could share that information with the Energy Office, and I can keep it proprietary. And it's not discoverable. It's a great law that we have in the state that I can talk to private sector and prevent that antitrust sharing with that privacy law. And so if you tell me it's proprietary, then I don't disclose it out of my office, then I can scrub it and share it with who else I need to. The biggest thing that I love this idea of that y'all are planning together, but how is that shared with the state and the local levels? Because y'all know these vulnerabilities. From a policy standpoint, if I do not know any of these vulnerabilities, then I don't know if, for instance, maybe that would be a good place for some of our grid resilience funding to help with. Maybe that's where some of our mitigation funding should go to. But if we do not know those vulnerabilities and we have such a small relative pool to help, then we can't better the system too. And that's one of the biggest deficits, is sharing that information and trusting that you can share it with us and we're not going to disclose it also.
I think that's the key, is that, Ben, I adore you, absolutely, but there's not 50 Bens out there. And so once we figure out a vulnerability between us, the more we share that information, now we've just made us more vulnerable. And so the question is, the model in Tennessee rocks. It's a great model. It works. Can that be duplicated in other states? It depends. Other states are governed very differently. And just as, the National Governors Association is like, well, how do we get the governors to understand where the emergencies, where the events, the vulnerabilities are and everything? I say exercise, 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 and don't invite the media. Well, we have to invite the media because it's a public relations thing. Well, then don't exercise and don't expect to learn the vulnerabilities. So not every state's going to be the same.
And to answer your question about how the states find out, so I work for one of the regions, and I know most all the regions are kind of following suit, but we're going out to the states. We're talking about these types of vulnerabilities. We're talking about the risks on the system being that gas electric nexus. We're talking all kinds of risks. But we've got a team at Reliability First that actually goes out and talks to as high up as they can get in the states and has these conversations so that they can get the support and help get that backing for anybody and everybody that needs it within our 14 state footprint that we have.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect place to wrap it up, because what we're trying to do, what we have here, what this discussion highlighted was a best practice that was essentially voluntary on the part of forward-leaning utilities on both the gas and electric side. But it's y'all weaved around these challenges that were legal, that were you know, and kind of part of like just ossified practices that haven't.
But wait, there's more. Okay, wait. So, one, I cannot leave without sharing this with you. The Natural Gas Readiness Forum, okay?
Thank you.
The National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners made a recommendation that, fortunately, AGA was selected to administer the Natural Gas Readiness Forum. The purpose of the forum is to bring together the electric sector, the gas sector, the natural gas sector, upstream, midstream, downstream, generation, transmission, distribution, policymakers, the regulators, state emergency officers, public utility commissioners, bring them all together into a room annually for a national summit to talk about coordination. AGA took that one step further, and we do a couple regional workshops a year. We actually just finished it this past weekend. I came from the Sunday one to here. That was in Albuquerque. It was the Western workshop. And that was where we had the New Mexico state energy officer going, this is really great. Why are there not more state energy officers here? And I said, you know what, tell your friends. And then we had also done it clearly in the Northeast, where they have opportunities in the Northeast but they do a lot of collaboration, and we had a 3-hour tabletop exercise there with them. And we had near 100 people, again, state energy officers, multiple, and multiple utilities, pipelines. We're working on trying to get the production folks at the table. But again, it's provide a safe environment where we're not finger pointing, although we do finger point against telecom, but we're not finger pointing against each other in the energy world, so that we can figure out how to make this work for those bad events.
All right, thank you, Kimberly. We'll take a 15-minute break. I think we came across some best practices there. How do we move those forward into solidly implementable recommendations across different states, not just when you have a Ben Bolton, but other offices? So I appreciate the discussion. Let's take 15 minutes and coffee up. Thanks, guys.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. All right. We're going to. I'll stand behind the camera.
Okay, I got you.
All right. Okay. All right, Curtis, I have a couple of questions for you. This is related to the talk you'll be giving. The first one, I really want to talk about workforce fatigue. In multi-day emergency, why does workforce fatigue become a resilience issue?
Because if you don't have a sustainable approach and plan for your workforce, you will reach a point of exhaustion where you are unsafe, you are ineffective. And in this case, in this environment that we're getting ready to talk about, we're talking about a black sky environment, something we've never experienced before, a level of depth and endurance that's required. And you will not be able to go through the response, let alone a restoration effort, if you don't have a deliberate plan for your workforce. Our people are our most valuable asset, and if we abuse it, the system will fail us.
Thank you. And that takes us to the next question. What do leaders need to plan for when crews are working under extreme conditions?
They have to understand the operating environment that they're going into, the level of complexity and, yes, threat, safety hazards. How does that look in that environment? And then have a bench, a depth, and a plan for their personnel. Also understanding that the outside help that they typically rely on is not going to be coming in this situation. The typical inter-regional response that saves us during an ice storm or something, that is not going to be immediately available. So they have to have that plan and that depth planned out.
All right, thank you. And one final question. What is one lesson from a real recovery operation that people often overlook? You've got experience here.
You have to establish clear authority within your team. And I'm not just talking about your incident commander, so whoever's in charge of the whole setup. No, I'm talking about every sub area that is relevant to your specialty. Those people need to have clear authority to not only execute tasks, but to manage their workforce as well. They have to be able to look at someone and say, no, I'm in charge of this team. You are tired. You need to rest. B team, you're up. But if you don't establish those clear authorities, decisions won't be made. People will become exhausted. The system will fail.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This on? Okay. You hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah? Now? Hello, hello. This battery might be going down on it. I got one more over here. No? Is that working?
No. No, I'm not on.
Are the mics on? Are the mics on? Are the mics on? Are the mics on? You guys don't hear me, do you? Don't hear me over the speaker? All right, it must have a thing saying I want to do. I'm going to kind of really try to press. All right. Hey, Chance, is the system muted? Check, 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 to check, 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 to check, check. Check, 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 to check, 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 check. What's that? Okay. Thank you. I was like, why isn't this working? It's been working great all day.
And it hits all three major states involved. South Carolina, Power, North Carolina, everything. All 16 sectors. Penny, Tennessee was a little bit of everything too, but not, it was more pocketed. Power was not the big issue. It wasn't. It was more the water. Oh, yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. We're going to get going here. Hope everybody coffeeed up. I'm glad to see everyone exchanging business cards and talking. We're going to talk about some human factors topics this afternoon.
I'm going to a
A few minutes ago, you informally met Ben Bolton from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. And we also have Kurt Evans from Preparedness Consulting Services and Lihi Ganani. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Lihi, and we'll get going. Thanks, everybody.
Have a seat. I didn't know you were joining. Excellent.
Ben, everyone has been talking about you the whole day. I feel lucky to get the panel with you.
Well, you're in my hometown. I grew up here.
I know.
I went to school in Franklin, and so welcome to everybody to Franklin.
I dragged everyone to Franklin downtown yesterday.
I appreciate it.
I did. Thanks to you. So who is tired here?
Me.
We're going to talk about tiredness, okay? This is going to be our session today, about tiredness. What happened when the machines keep on working, but people are not as agile as the machines, no? How has it been for you, Ben?
So where to start? I think it's worth telling everyone why I keep getting intersected with all these things and discussions. So I, besides the fancy title that's a typical government title that's too long to say out loud, I'm also the infrastructure branch manager at the State Emergency Operations Center. When you see that big room on the news that usually the governor or the team of directors talking from, I'm in one of the peon seats helping coordinate the entire infrastructure response at the state level. It also means I'm not a regulator, so I get to say I'm from TDEC, I'm not here to regulate you, which is a really unusual thing to say when you're in the environmental agency also. But it also means that I know, and I came from the private sector as a consultant. Originally, like Amy, I was a biologist, a microbiologist basically, and then got into environmental consulting and then energy, and here we are. But that means in this decade alone, I've already responded to 26 level federally designated presidential declared disasters in just this decade. Yes, that's the record in the country right now, not one I'm proud of, but it's one I have to live with. Whether that's been a natural gas compressor station blowing up and not even making national news, but us dealing with it, or Hurricane Helene, where I was just talking with Curtis that I will never have that month of October back. I think I worked, we asked for reimbursement for my hours, and I put in over 240 hours in that month, in that 1 month. So if we end up in this black start situation,